The South Korean government has kept the spending increase at the lowest level in almost 2 decades for next year's budget, tightening its belt to shift away from previous expansionary policies while promising to spend more for the socially vulnerable. For more, joining me is our business correspondent, Shin Ha-young. Welcome back, Ha-young.
Great to be here, Dami.
So, Ha-young, the government is looking to spend less overall. What are the major shifts compared to Yoon's previous budget?
Well, Dami, for this year's budget, the Yoon administration focused on building a solid foundation for physical soundness. And while continuing with this theme for next year's budget as well, it has also focused on improving the country's financial structure. Take a listen.
우리 정부는 경제 체질을 시장 중심 민간 주도로 바꿔 민간이 더 활발하게 투자하고 지출하고 일자리를 만들어내는데 역점을 둘 것입니다. 이를 위해 민간 투자를 저해하는 킬러 규제를 과감하게 철폐하고 민간의 자금이 흘러갈 수 있도록 금융 시스템을 정비할 것입니다.
In order to do so, South Korea will continue to tighten its belt, and the government's proposed budget bill for next year comes to 656.9 trillion Korean won, or around $495 billion at the current rate. And it's an increase of 2.8% from this year's budget, the smallest on-year increase since top-down budgeting was first introduced in 2005. And also, the government has gone through major spending reforms in order to secure an extra $17 billion of funds for use in the budget that will be used to stabilize people's livelihoods and for public safety.
But the government at the same time stressed that it won't be too frugal or stingy about everything though, right?
Right, Dami. Well, in this case, the centerpiece of the bill is some $14.6 billion allocated to bolster the welfare system for the socially vulnerable. And this includes increasing the maximum basic living allowance for low-income families to approximately $1,400 per month. And that's $160 more compared to this year and more than the total increase implemented by the previous administration.
You know, speaking of the socially vulnerable, I've noticed some significant changes for senior citizens and also young people. So what can these particular social groups can they look forward to?
You're right, Dami. As a response to the aging society issue, the government has increased the number of jobs for senior citizens to 1 million, and which is approximately 10% of the elderly population, and also marks a record high increase of 147,000. And it has also increased senior employment allowances by 7%, and those allowances have been frozen since 2018. And the budget bill will also be used to provide counseling and training to motivate and encourage the so-called NEET tribe in South Korea. NEET is an acronym for not currently engaged in education, employment, or training. It is also planning to introduce a transportation card called K-Pass in July next year, which will reduce the burden of transit expenses for young people by 30% or more than $245 per year.
I'm really interested in this K-Pass as a person who heavily relies on public transportation.
Right, sure.
Now, though, the government has also suggested the budget for the low birth rate, right? You know, it's been a long part of the national budget for who knows how long. It's also being tackled in the 2024 edition again, right? What's the key takeaway?
Right, Dami. So the Yoon administration has decided to spend some of the budget on dealing with the country's low birth rate. And under the 2024 budget, parents with newborns will be eligible for up to 1 million won, or around $750 per month in parental allowance beginning next year. Also, to achieve a balance between work and childcare, the period of paid childcare leave, in this case for both maternity and paternity leave, will be extended for the first time since 1995 from 12 months to 18 months.
Despite all these government efforts to actually cut spending though, you know, defense budget has gone up Do tell us more about that.
That's right, Dami. As for next year's defense budget, the government has announced a plan to raise the growth rate by 0.1 percentage point to 4.5%, even in a situation where the overall government expenditure growth rate was considerably reduced. And this is the first time since 2017 that the growth rate of the defense budget has surpassed that of total expenditure. And out of roughly $45 billion, the defense ministry is seeking to spend around 13.5 $5 billion to bolster defense capabilities, which is 5.2% higher compared to the year before. And this includes building a combined combat system using both manned and unmanned assets, as well as developing the country's so-called three-axis defense system, a scheme to counter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. And the first axis is to preemptively strike North Korea's nuclear and missile sites when there are signs of imminent attack targeting South Korea. And if that fails, it moves on to the second axis, intercepting launch missiles using a multi-layer missile defense system. And finally, the third axis, mass retaliation against North Korea following attack on the South. The ministry also designated $31 billion to run its military forces, an increase of 5.8% on year.
Now, Ha-young, before I let you go, any new changes that South Korean businesses or industries can pay extra attention to in next year's budget?
Well, in terms of cultural content exports and securing intellectual property rights, the government will be investing more than twice as much compared to this year. Take a listen.
Amid the heating up of OTT platform competition around the world, to promote cultural content exports and secure intellectual property rights, we'll expand policy financing from 800 billion won to 1.8 trillion won, more than double, by establishing a new K-Content Strategic Fund.
Also, financial support for AI, biotech, cybersecurity, and South Korea's digital platform government, which connects data across the private and public sectors, will be expanded from the current $2.7 billion to $3.3 billion to help advance the service industry.
You know, boosting exports and encouraging more businesses, these plans also seem to align with South Korea's latest vision to become one of the best countries in the world to start a business.
Right, definitely.
All right, Ha-young, thanks so much for the comprehensive report today.
Always my pleasure.
All right.